And welcome back. Here we are. This is our fourth in the series of videos on Flash CS6. So we're on the same screen as we were before with our two different layers. This time we're going to talk a little bit more about the layers and what impact it has on where things are, how to add layers, which is through this little guy. We've already deleted layers using the trash can, just as a reminder. So those are things that we've already seen and done. We're going to be taking a look at a couple of other things this time, in addition to how we got our things to move using the classic tweens, indicated by the purple areas in here in our timeline. We're also going to take a look at a new layer that will take advantage of the modern motion tween that Flash offers us. And last but not least, we'll take a look at how to use alpha to add a kind of a fade in or a fade out effect. Okay, so before we go any further though, just to kind of recap, the file that we made and saved within Flash was this thing called the Flash document. And if you recall, that was an FLA file type. Okay, and that was saved in Flash CS5.5, even though we're using Flash CS6 right now. So that if we were to use Flash 5.5 somewhere, we'd be able to still access this document. Okay, we could of course lose some more features that were only available in Flash CS6, but if you're working in more than one environment with different versions, then you can take advantage of that save as feature. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is when we hit Control Enter, it actually published our movie, and the published version is this SWF file. Okay, and if you notice here, it's called a Swift movie or an SWF movie. So that's the kind of thing that we can either just double click and play on, which opens up the Flash player, or we could put this file inside of a web page so that would be then part of our animation included in an HTML document. So we have some options there. Alright, so just wanted to point that out. Through the work that we've done so far then, we've had an FLA file that we've saved, and we also have published with Control Enter an SWF file. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about these layers. Right now we have two layers, one for each of the two objects. And remember, we can hide a layer by doing that, and we can lock a layer by doing this. Locking, often useful for when you want to keep from accidentally editing something or changing it. Alright, but one thing to point out, as you notice, when I scrub across, we see that the one graphic, the swoosh, is on top of the K of kids. And that's because this layer, swoosh, actually is on top of the kids text layer. So if I change this, if I click and drag, we'll see that right now it would move above the swoosh in the layers panel. And sure enough, you can see that now that that layer is on top, we see the yellow part of that K as opposed to the green part of the K. Alright, and again, so that process was grab, press down and click with your left button, hold it down, and then drag the layer to its new home. Okay, so just like that, you can have an impact on the visuals, the layering of your animation. Okay, so that's one thing that we can take note of. Right now, recall that these two layers are both using the classic tweens, and we're going to take a look at how to use one of the newer tweens in Flash. It's been around for a couple versions now, but so far what you're seeing should work in almost any version of Flash. The ones you're seeing or about to see will work in the last 2 or 3 versions of Flash. Okay, so I'm going to temporarily get rid of this layer, and I'm going to create a brand new layer. Okay, and that's this little icon down here. It looks like a little pack of sticky notes. Click on it, I get a new layer. And something we haven't talked about yet is how to get access to some of the symbols that we've created, and that can be done by using what's known as the library. Okay, and the library just keeps track of the various things that we've used inside of our animation so far. Okay, so for instance, if I wanted to add in the kids, I could grab that and drop it back on the stage. And the advantage of doing this is that if we had several of the same kind of object that we wanted to use over and over again, if I use instances from the library as opposed to recreating things and saving them in Flash, my file size will be much smaller, and ultimately my animations can be cleaner, and the file size for downloading will be better for people too. So by adding this new layer in, my goal is to be able to demonstrate the new modern version of some of the tweens that are available. And one thing I want to do though right away is to change this layer, rename it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to double click, and I'm going to say kids text 2, just to help myself differentiate between those two. Okay, so again, now I've got a new layer. It has the same symbol on it, but so far, if I click off of here on the timeline, you'll see that it just exists. It doesn't have any animation to it yet. Okay. All right. So this is where we're going to start to see some of the new kinds of animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on that keyframe, and by doing that, we can see our good old friend here, the classic tween. But one that we haven't used that yet is this Create Motion Tween. Okay, and that wasn't available in I think probably the first version we saw this was maybe CS4 or CS5. So prior to them, we didn't ever have this as an option. Okay, so by creating a motion tween, it works differently than the other tweens, and it's kind of a matter of preference what kind you like. So let's take a look at what this does. So far no animation, but you'll notice the coloring is a bluish tint rather than the purple tints with the classic tweens. Okay, so what I can do though is on any point that I want to move, I can click on that layer. I'm going to make sure these guys are temporarily hidden and locked, and if I move this or change it in some way, you'll see that Flash automatically added in this small diamond here, which is a lot like the keyframes that we used to add in by hand by clicking F6. So in this fashion, all I have to do is go on the timeline where I want to be, and Flash will add in these little mini keyframes for me. Okay? And if I'm competent in what I'm doing, then I should be able to get the animation pretty close to what I want by doing this. Okay, so let me go ahead and temporarily bring this guy back, and let's hit the enter key to see if that's doing it. So the advantage is by using the motion tween, we don't have to do as many inserting of keyframes ourselves, and the Flash will then automatically kind of put in the in-between spots for us. Let me hide this for a second again. And if you notice, when I was moving it, it created these little dots. So each of these little dots, these little green dots, is indicating the stuff that Flash did for us. So the slightly bigger circles are the ones that I created by dragging the symbol to a certain spot when I was on the timeline, and that corresponds to these guys. So when I'm right on the spot where I moved it, it automatically had Flash put the symbol there, and if I fast forward to my next little dot, you'll see it traveled on those smaller dots to the one that I had dragged the symbol to. Okay, so that's what's known as a motion tween, and that's only available in the last few versions of Flash. Okay, now there are a lot of other things we can do with Flash besides just having things move. One thing we're going to take a look at here shortly is how to take advantage of something called Alpha, which really controls how visible something is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to remove this kids layer because we're now using this other guy. So I'm going to delete that one. And if you notice, the icon for these two layers is actually different as well. So that's giving us an indicator that we were using the motion tweens. Okay. Alright, so let me go ahead and unhide that and bring it back. And if you recall then, what we were doing with our, when we added our keyframes in ourselves, we would go to a certain spot in the timeline, hit F6, and then do some kind of change to the object. So what I'm going to do It's the same kind of idea. So knowing ahead of time that I'd like to have this kind of fade in and out, I'm going to go to roughly the middle. I guess that would be about 25. I'm going to go to the middle and add a keyframe here. Alright, and I'm doing this because I'm going to have it both fade in and fade out. So let me go ahead and click here. And in order to get this, I'm going to go ahead and minimize my library. And what I want to do is to change an effect of this symbol. So I know that this is here because I've done it before, but it's under color effect. And if you notice, it's got a little triangle, so I can move it around if I need to. And right now it's on none. I'm going to go ahead and choose alpha. And what alpha does is when something has a full alpha of 100%, that means it's fully visible. And if I drag it down to 0, the end effect is it's on the stage, but it's not visible. So it's more or less invisible. Alright, so by doing that at frame 1, as I come across now, it will both be moving and fading into existence. And what I want to do is then, just to kind of complete this little use of alpha, I'll click on my symbol, make sure I'm under color effect again, head down to alpha, and bring it back to 100. Notice that it automatically jumped to 0 because the last time I was on that setting, on the alpha setting, I had it at 0, so it jumped right back there. But I really want, at the end of my animation, actually I do want it at 0, I want it to fade out as well. Okay, so let this scrub. We see it fade in and fade out. Okay? Alright. So, there are a lot of other things we could take a look at, but what I'm just going to briefly show you is how you can have a little fun with this, and I'll leave this to you to kind of figure out. But if I hit enter right now, I've done some other changes to the animation. And those are all using, actually in this case, the classic tweens, the alpha, and some use of the color properties. So until next time, happy animating!